In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.
Welcome to Inside Style, DCRadio.gov, 96.3 HD4. I'm your host, George Worrell, and thank you for tuning in today. I have the pleasure of talking to Rabbi Aaron Alexander. Rabbi Alexander, Aaron, welcome to Inside Style. Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks, George. I really appreciate the invitation. Looking forward to talking today.
You are like the coolest rabbi I've ever met. Why I asked you, we were at a...
I'm going to make my kids listen to that.
Okay. You are.
Just that one line.
Because, as I work in fashion, and I'm like, it's just innate that I look at people, not judging, but just kind of look. And you have like the best sneaker game that I know in town. I saw your sneakers. We were at the Emancipation Lunch. And we were sitting next to each other, and we started talking. I was like, God, this guy, I didn't know. And I was like, wow, he is like so cool. I want to have him come on. And thanks for doing that. And you've not disappointed today with the sneaker game. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you hail from? Is it L.A. or did you go to school in L.A.? Or?
So I'm from a little bit of everywhere.
Okay.
I was born outside of Chicago in Northwest Indiana and lived there until I was about 13 years old. My mother and stepfather then moved the Brady Bunch family, which we were, to Boca Raton, Florida.
Wow, that's a switch.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
A pretty big switch. Northwest Indiana to South Florida in the late 1980s. From there, I went to the University of Florida. After that, I moved to Jerusalem, lived there for 2 years, then went to Los Angeles for rabbinical school, ended up staying, was there just about 15 years before moving to Washington, D.C. to work at Addis Israel, where I still am. That was 2015, so I'm in my 8th year now.
Oh, well, welcome. So what brought you to L.A.?
L.A., I went to for rabbinical school.
Okay.
I was in Israel studying, had no intentions of becoming a rabbi, heard a lecture, a talk, and was so blown away by what a religious vision could look like that I basically said, this rabbi, his name was Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, his name still is Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, said, I think I need to go wherever he's teaching. And he's the dean of a seminary in Los Angeles at the American Jewish University. And I essentially crossed the Mississippi for the first time, outside of a couple ski trips when I was young. I drove my Mercury Grand Marquis across the country. And found that it didn't quite fit in Los Angeles, but kept it anyway.
And so how was your time there? So
Los Angeles, my soul is still in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You'll never take my soul out of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I went for 5 years of rabbinical school. After I was ordained, I stayed on as a dean of the rabbinical school, and my first career was essentially in academia, teaching rabbinical students.
Okay.
So coming to D.C. was not only jarring in terms of L.A. to D.C., with the exception of one thing, the traffic. Those two things are very similar. Everything else is absolutely different. It was a pretty big jump to move from a small university to a gigantic pulpit here in the city.
Okay. So once you got here, what was the staying quality? What was it that attracted you to say, this is what I want to do? How am I going to get involved? There's politics here. There's all of this stuff. How do I navigate this and make my stamp?
So there was something exciting about coming to Washington, D.C. In Los Angeles, I was involved as a lay organizer with the PICO National Network, and found politics and the capacity for, quote unquote, ordinary people to amass power and create change in the societies in which they live. To actually attempt that in Washington, D.C., to me was an opportunity that I really didn't want to pass up. I had, at that point, 2 small children. I think, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old or something like that. So in terms of making a move across the country, that was probably a better time to say, if I'm going to have another career, I want to do it on my terms. And this community, this synagogue here in Washington, feels like a very unique and special place. It had gone through already a transformation from an institution of the 20th century to an institution of the 21st century, which many synagogues, churches, and mosques still have yet to accomplish. And
what was that change that you thought that needed to happen?
So 20th century Jewish life, at least sort of 20th century synagogue life, was built in many ways around a model of worship that was created to make the Jewish community feel more comfortable as they assimilated into American society earlier on in the 20th century. So you would have like a stage in the front, and it would be very formal, and everybody would be in suits and ties, and any noises or movements that were outside of what the clergy were telling you to do in that very moment were seen as outside of the norm. Jewish identity revolved very much around the state of Israel, especially after 1967, and the Holocaust. And so religion is not meant to be contained in a box. It is adventurous, it is grounding, it is ancient, it is sometimes precarious. It asks people to be vulnerable. It asks for music that move people's hearts. Those changes have begun, and in many places have now come to a place where they define the communities in which they exist. Addis Israel is one of those communities. You cannot predict what will happen on a Friday night or a Saturday morning. There are kids running around the place making more noise than the people who are praying lots of times. We are not scripted at all.
Okay, so well, I come from a Pentecostal background in religion, so I'm used to what we call the Holy Spirit taking over. So it's lovely to see that that's happening.
It is. I've been to Pentecostal churches, so the Holy Spirit can take over in a synagogue. It still ain't going to look like a Pentecostal church. But we can dream that too.
But I think that's in different forms. Do you know what I mean? Like what people are used to and what people are comfortable with.
Yeah.
So
change is hard.
Change is hard, but I mean, like you were inspired by the rabbi that you heard. I'm sure that there are people who are inspired by what you're saying, like how I'm inspired by what you're saying today, and hopefully our listeners are as well. That when you have that aha moment when you're hearing something that somebody says that you've not thought about, or you have thought about it, and it's like, I've never thought about it that way, and how it's being broached. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I grew up in a when I lived in Indiana in a very small Jewish community. I was always one of a very small handful, if not the only Jewish kid in class. My synagogue was not that large. It was very, let's call it, stiff, if also warm.
That's a combination.
I'm going to do this really delicately.
Okay.
It was not egalitarian, which means men's and women's roles in the synagogue were not the same. That's a major shift that Judaism, at least progressive Judaism, has now, I want to say structurally accomplished, though it's hard to get rid of the residuals of misogyny in any religious tradition. You should know that I work at Addis Israel. We have 6 full-time clergy. I'm the only male.
And I noticed that you seem like, because even when you prayed, when you were at the Emancipation Luncheon, that was a big part of your speech about women not having equal rights. And we were all listening intently. And
we're not there yet. Yeah. We're not there yet. I mean, in this city, in this country, there are places in which glass ceilings have been cracked, broken, shattered. And there are others, sometimes more invisible, in which too many people still don't have the same opportunities that others have. Anyway, God never found me in a synagogue.
Okay.
God found me at a Grateful Dead concert. That experience informs almost, and then the traveling with the Grateful Dead for years afterwards informs almost everything I do as a rabbi, truly.
My uncle, who was a bishop, said to me I was a kid that the people who already know the follower are fine. The people who don't, like maybe at the Grateful Dead concert or at the mall or listening to you here, these are the people we really want to reach. Because if you've not done anything, you know, and it just resonated with me about that. And I just think that what you're doing and having a voice and speaking to what we call power, I just call it the decision makers, and hopefully that they are listening. How are you cracking that? How are you approaching that with the message?
So I think
or is it hard?
It's very hard.
Okay.
I think it's always hard in a formal setting to give people the space to be vulnerable enough to hear something, see something, experience something, or feel something that offers them a glimpse at a different future for themselves, or even a more layered present. It's hard. Formal settings, even at an emancipation lunch, you know, where it's like speaker after speaker and beautiful music and art and all of those things, like that event was created to open people up, to pierce people's hearts, and still the formality of it is challenging. And I think within religious life, we cannot escape our institutional formal settings. They have given us a platform to perhaps make a difference, change people's lives. At the same time, anything we can do to break through that formality, to give people a sense of spontaneity, will be helpful. So we do that by being as transparent as we possibly can about our own religious lives and our own spiritual journeys. So we, the clergy, my clergy team, my co-senior rabbi, Rabbi Holtzblatt, we talk openly about what we're feeling, where we have serious doubts about our tradition, where we have real challenges with the history of our tradition and the ways in which it has lifted some people up, but many others down. And those conversations inform then how we live in the world and what we choose to prioritize within our lives and within our services and our teaching of Scripture and all of those things. It's hard, but we find that if we can delayer our own hearts and leave them a little bit open for people to see, it gives permission to others in the room to do the very same. So if I look up and I see somebody in synagogue crying, something has happened in the space that allowed them to be who they need to be in that particular moment.
Does being a part of the interfaith coalition help? How is that? You know, there's more than one person in the boat. So
it does. It does. We have so much to learn from our sister traditions. I'm on the strategy team for the Washington Interfaith Network, and so Addis Israel organizes within Washington, D.C., together with a number of other churches, mosques, institutions, religious and non-religious, to help create a Washington, D.C. that we will continue to be proud of, create, recreate, reshape. And so in the context of organizing together, we spend a lot of time in each other's institutions, learning about other faith-based traditions. And to be in the prayers, like we talked about with the Pentecostal churches, to be in somebody else's prayer space is to see what it looks like for another human being opening themselves up to the master of the world in a way that maybe I could never have imagined previously, but could now influence what happens in my own, even if I don't take that theology back with me. I mean, the theologies do tend to separate us.
How does, how are you able to reach out to our Politico to help to change maybe some of the negative things that are happening, not just in our city, but across the nation? Like, that's a huge job. And I think that we're too dependent on the people who we elect to solve everything. I think it's a community effort, but I'd like to get your input on what you think the church, the synagogue, the mosque, the people who are speaking, what part do they play, and if they can, to turn some of this around?
I think religious institutions are deeply embedded in civic communities and therefore have an obligation and a responsibility to be part of those communities in a positive way. It's tricky because we ought not be partisan. We have parishioners who vote differently than each other and certainly vote differently than we do on a regular basis. And so our job is to use our religious tradition to shine a light upon some of the injustices we experience today. Using the religious tradition grounds what it is we will organize around in something much bigger than any one person's political whim. So yes, we have a role. When it comes to how we interact with, let's say, politicians, look, the first thing we all need to recognize is that power never gives itself up. Nobody with power ever, especially within a secular structure, will hand over that power to somebody else. It is either taken away from them or the time runs out. So in order to move those with power, one has to build a different kind of power, a power of people coming together around shared interests and lovingly, but sometimes vigorously confronting those in power with a different vision and also a path forward. So in our organizing with the Washington Interfaith Network, we work often with the city, with Mayor Bowser, not in an adversarial way, but in a way that allows the city, the council, whoever it is, to understand that there are large numbers of people in this city who experience a reality that does not live up to the dignity they have been embedded with as human beings. And the more people we bring together, the more power we have to show those who are in power that maybe it's okay to release some of that power to those who will benefit most from it. The city right now, I just want to say, in some areas we do this well, in many others, there are still too many people who suffer because the systems that govern the city, now I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about
overall
age-old systems that we have not transcended, still don't provide pathways to a different future. Those systems we need to change. And religious people have an obligation to be a part of that.
But also, too, we had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this, too. Yes, we can have the programs, and then we can implement them, and then we can charge them, but you have to have something within you. There has to be something, a fire, a desire. Like when they say come to church, like you have to have a desire. In AA, you have to have a desire. And, all these things. Nothing's going to change with all the programs, all the preaching, unless you have a desire. Now, I feel that if you're hearing what you're saying and you touch something, then that desire can come. That fire that you didn't know that was there can come out. That's just my feeling.
I love it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, somebody's got to be inspired. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of despair out there. I don't care what religious tradition one is practicing or where one is serving as a clergy person. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic level somebody may find themselves in. Despair is real. The question for each of us who have a voice or a microphone or a platform is how can we instill hope within those who need to see a different kind of future is possible, and at the same time, those who are in charge of the systems need to continue to create ways for people to trust that their hopes and dreams can actually be fulfilled in the world or the community in which they live. Those two things do not align often enough, but I think we all have a responsibility together to ensure that at least it's possible. I want to see that it's possible.
I get that. What is a normal day, evening outside of the synagogue with your wife and your 3 boys? How does that equate? All
right, so you should know that I'm married to a rabbi as well, Rabbi Aaron Alexander.
Okay.
We met in rabbinical school.
Okay.
That is not so uncommon.
Okay.
Because the rabbinate is such a unique profession that oftentimes rabbinical students will meet and fall in love, and he and she, or she and she, or he and he will begin their lives together within the same pulpits or sometimes outside of the same pulpits. My wife works in Rockville. I work here in Washington, D.C. We have 3 young children, so our lives are all over the place. Downtime, vacation time, when they are synced up one with the other. Look, we definitely love finding time to go to the beach and to take the kids to the beach.
Okay.
We do that when we can. We live in Crestwood, and so we love going out, walking, visiting different parks, or even walking into the park.
Carter Barron is.
Carter Barron is right there.
Okay.
And when I have, anytime I can find, I will be driving somewhere to a concert. Music continues to lift me up, live music in particular, lift me up in ways that almost nothing else can, besides for the people in my life. But I like to be alone, and I have a Jack Kerouac sense of adventure. I will just get in the car and drive and find myself at a concert, enjoy the unexpected, and then come back into a life that is actually, it's unpredictable because I'm a clergy member and I work with people, but it's predictable in the kinds of things that I will be doing on a regular basis.
Well, that's a level of freedom we all should have.
Right?
Do you know what I mean? Like, that sounds superb, that you're able to that your mate understands you so much that freedom, and I'm sure you can.
She understands it. We have to bring her in here to ask her how much she loves it.
I want her to come back. Yeah, I'm going to have her come, and we'll have that. So what about travel out of the country? Have you taken your kids abroad?
Our kids have never left the country. Actually, so once in a while I get to do or to officiate at a destination wedding.
Okay.
I have officiated at weddings in Costa Rica and in Panama and in the Turks and Caicos. When they happen, it's such a gift. So we went to Panama together. That was several years ago, and had an absolute blast, and did a little bit of traveling together, just the 2 of us. My wife's parents came in and stayed with the kids and helped take care of them. We haven't. I think part of it is it's just with children at the ages that we have them. It's unbelievably expensive to leave the country, to fly anywhere right now when you're flying with 5 people. Okay. And so I think part of us really wants to get them out of this country so that they can see the world, and another part of us wants to wait just a little bit longer so that the memories which will be implanted within them when we go will be more distinctive as they grow older, and they will be able to experience a new place in a way that I think only age maturity will allow them to experience.
Wow, I get it. What's the last book that you read that you would suggest that everybody read?
I'm not going to say the Torah, the 5 books of Moses.
Okay.
Although that is pretty much what I am reading on a regular basis because it's the platform, the template for the sermons that we give on a weekly basis. But that's not fair because I'm a rabbi, and so to say the Torah or scripture is just too obvious that it's,
Do you read outside of?
Yeah, I do. I do read a lot, depending on the time of year, especially over the summer.
Summer. You take things to the beach? Or?
Take things to the beach. I am happy to read spy novels.
Okay.
I'm also happy to read philosophy, and I'm my particular field of scholarship is Jewish law, and so I am often reading some of the latest scholarship on concepts within Jewish law. Right now at Addis Israel, I am leading a book group on books revolving around Israel and Palestine. And so we're reading Israeli authors, American authors, some Palestinian authors on both fiction and nonfiction. And so I just read with the group a beautiful book by Mati Friedman called Who by Fire. It's about Leonard Cohen and Israel's 1973 war. It is a beautiful poetic book. I also recently read with my group a book called In This Place Together. It's written by Penina Eilberg-Schwartz and Suleiman Khatib. In particular, it is a story of a Palestinian who grew up in beyond the Green Line in Israel, so the West Bank, and it's an unbelievable, heart-opening book on what it could mean for two peoples, neither of whom are going anywhere, to learn how to live together.
So I want to put another book on your list.
Please.
It's called Dyed in Wool.
Dyed in Wool.
Uh-huh. Do you want to know who the author is?
I do.
George Worrell. I'm going to make sure
Are you
get a
plugging
copy.
your book?
I'm plugging
Good.
my book. Yeah.
You should plug your book.
I'm plugging my book.
So,
I'm
all right, tell me about. Can you tell me about your book?
It's a pictorial of how a young African-American man comes of age. And I wrote it because I wanted to... I was thinking about how I got into the fashion game. And I had all these pictures that my grandmother left me on both sides, and my parents had. And I started doing something just for myself and my family, and it ended up being a book. So
I love it.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So as we wind down, give us a quick, is there a secret to happiness? Or is there a journey to it? What's something that you would leave with us to say, this is the road, this is something that you should think about. I know it comes from within.
Yeah. So I guess I want to answer that by deflecting just a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
Happiness, at least as I understand it and within my tradition, is real but also fleeting. It comes and it goes. It is not an enduring presence in our lives. Joy and contentment can be, because joy it's not giddy. It's the moment in which life feels most real and I feel most at home with who I am at the moment and where I am and with whom surrounds me. So I think the secret to joy is, one, figuring out who we are and finding a place with which we can actually live that reality with supportive people around us and in a community or a religious tradition or a civic tradition that honors who we are. That's where joy comes from. Joy does not mean that pain and suffering will not exist. Joy is the ability to place each where it belongs, sometimes right together, one next to the other, nestled up, and then navigate life within that. And I think our religious traditions really advocate for that kind of contentment. They just don't ask us to hide who we are. And so that's the kind of religious community we are trying to create at Addis Israel, and that I want to always find myself in as I continue to move through my career.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. This is amazing. I'm going to have your wife back and then probably have the both of you back. Listen, how can we get in contact? Are you on social media?
You can.
Okay.
You can find me definitely on Instagram. No idea what my ad is, and I'm on TikTok.
Okay.
I think it's like at Aaron Alexander 830 or something like that. You can find me there.
Perfect.
And Facebook I think I'm now at the age where Facebook should be my primary social media
All
because
of
I'm
it.
too old for the others.
No,
but
no,
anyway,
no.
I'm there
no,
too.
The message is not old. But thank you so much for coming in,
Thanks, George.
Rabbi Alexander. This has been wonderful for me, and I'm sure for our listeners. Thank you for listening to Inside Style, DC Radio 96.3 HD4. I am your host, George Worrell. Remember, real style starts with being comfortable in your own skin. Reach out to me on Instagram, George Worrell Style. You can check out me subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is George Worrell Style, and our new web series that is called Neighborhood Favorites. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.